Hey guys, I'm sure if you hear, you agree that Spider-Man 2 is a phenomenal game. And one of the themes that I really took away from it that was evident, I think, from the get-go, and they've definitely been building up for this, but it's the support pillar behind Peter Parker in terms of, for example, all of his personal relationships, his aunt, in the first Insomniac game with Dr. Octopus, that close, uh, I call him his hero. Everything was flipped on its head by the end of that game. And they were already building the seeds because at the start of the game, he also was not in a relationship with Mary Jane, but the whole arc between him and her is rebuilding their relationship, not just on the confines of love, but also on the confines of trust and partnership through all aspects of their life. After they got back together, you could see, in terms of joining forces, you can see that Mary Jane was a pivotal part within getting information to Peter. And oftentimes she had to put herself on the limb, for example, with getting the file case on Devil's Breath or the information on Tombstone and his dealings. And this brings us to where we are inside of Spider-Man 2, where going forward there's going to be spoilers for Spider-Man 2. So if you haven't played the game yet, this is your chance to click off the video, but I will probably be talking about certain examples. In Spider-Man 2, we see that not just Mary Jane, but Miles Morales as well, were pillars of support for Peter, which is weird to think about because oftentimes Peter is kind of that mentor to Miles and always saving Mary Jane, and they take that theme and completely flip it on its head to where Miles and Mary Jane throughout the entirety of the story are both attempting to walk with Peter. Instead of walking behind him, they want to be side by side. And there's plenty of examples. We're going to focus on Mary Jane and then we'll get into a little bit about Miles. Mary Jane is very simple, I feel, as, again, they were coming off of the coattails of the previous game to where the relationship has become more of a mutual understanding and partnership. Mary Jane, throughout the entirety of the game, was a support system in order to bring Peter back to reality. She was the personal relationship with Peter Parker first and Spider-Man second. This is in contrast to Miles Morales, is who has a different angle. They each tackle a different aspect of Peter's life. Miles Morales was Spider-Man first, Peter second. So they each have an interesting viewpoint of Peter's life and are able to help in different ways as they step up into their new roles. Miles Morales is specifically the one that I want to talk about by getting into a specific example that I have seen within an anime actually called My Hero Academia. Inside of My Hero, just a brief synopsis, it's a TV show or manga or anime that's centered around an individual attempting to become the number one hero. And one of the side characters within this show, their goal in life is to be a hero in society that helps other heroes. Not a support hero specifically, but helping heroes that get into ruts. And specifically, that's what we see Miles and Mary Jane do repeatedly throughout the entirety of this game. Miles had the biggest hand on this. Not only was he the one to free Peter from the symbiote, but he was also the one to save Peter. After going into Peter's subconscious with Mr. Negative, Martin Lee, he was able to understand Peter's fears and what would drive him over the edge. Throughout the entirety of the game, Miles was that support that kept Peter's head on. This culminates within the final scene of the game as Miles is the one to rescue Harry, knowing that if Harry was to pass away, Peter would go over the edge and would not be recognizable. Much like how he was with the symbiote, where going back to the symbiote, especially in the final battle, you can see how Venom was pushing all of the negative emotions they had towards Peter at Miles. That's because Miles is the Spider-Man for Peter. Just as much as Peter is the Spider-Man for everyone, Miles is the Spider-Man for everyone. Miles is Peter's Spider-Man because there's no other at this point in time. Due to Miles, he was not only able to save Peter from the symbiote, but he was also able to save Peter from experiencing the loss that they've both felt in the previous game. When I really think about it, their arcs that both Miles and Mary Jane were set on within the first game, in terms of their personal relationship with Peter, are flip-flop, to where Mary Jane's sole purpose in Spider-Man 2 is to help the Spider-Man side of Peter, as seen with figuring out Dr. Connors and hunting down the hunters. Funny. But Miles was completely different. Miles, who knew him as Spider-Man first and then Peter second, his sole purpose was keeping Peter alive. He, throughout multiple times, as soon as he noticed Peter with a dark suit and acting differently, was the first one to start continuously reaching out to him. Not that Mary Jane and Harry Osborn weren't, but they were able to connect with him differently due to that connection of Spider-Man first and Peter second. Nobody would understand Peter's place more than Miles now with the given responsibility of being Spider-Man. They were able to build a very close relationship in a short amount of time due to this connection that nobody else can compare to, because even though Mary Jane was helping the Spider-Man side of things, not being out there on the streets and having those powers, you are not going to have that personal connection. I can definitely relate in terms of finding personal things with somebody that I might have been at odds with. We're easily able to connect, very easily, and it's like night and day. Insomniac does a terrific job with portraying these three characters within this game, and I definitely believe that going forward, Miles will continue to more or less be this pillar for Peter. Even though Peter is taking some time off, I do believe he's going to be in the next game, giving the open character arcs of Dr. Octopus and this G serum that Norman Osborn was talking about. There's no way that Peter is not going to rear his head, and ultimately I feel another situation is going to arise to where Peter will impact these two characters in some type of way, having to play that last role as Uncle Ben played for him. Now, I don't necessarily want this to happen, but narratively, for the character of Miles and Mary Jane, it would make sense for their character growth to come full circle with the death of Peter Parker, due to the responsibility that will fully be placed within their hands of knowing that they can only be relied on to themselves. They can't trust they can't count on anybody else. It's solely on them. But why don't you let me know what you think about this? Do you think the examples that I hit are correct, or do you view this differently? Why don't you comment down below, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.